Hey everybody, how's it going this morning? Welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA. And we're going to stay in USA today, but we're heading to Canada. I'm so glad you could join us. I hope you enjoy today's session. Kamloops and Shuswap. Been practicing all morning. I think I screwed it up right off the bat. The local time is about 8:47, more or less. I've got a thank you that I want to do here, so I'm starting a couple minutes early. But you know the drill by now. If you are watching this in replay, actually, if you're watching this in replay, I got two messages for you. Number one, the program will begin at 9 o'clock. That's a little more than 10 minutes from now, so you know that you can fast forward to 10 minutes into this program to actually see the start of the lecture. But the other thing I think I want to say is that, did you see the last show? Hey, replay people, that's most of you, right? There's about 1,000 that watch live typically, and then there's another, I don't know what it is, another 10, 15,000 people that watch the replay. I think you should watch the last show before you watch this one. You're watching this in replay, you're watching this in the summer of 2022 or the fall of 2027, I don't know. But I'm going to be referring quite a bit to the last show, which I guess is, what's the letter before X? W? Make sure you watch Eocene W, Metamorphic Core Complexes, before you watch this one. Okay, so who can we say hi to this morning? Are we 5x5? David says we're 5x5. Thank you for that, David, in Omaha, Nebraska. Appreciate it. See a couple other 5x5s. Cliff's in Winnipeg, Manitoba. He says it's 555. Garrett, the Dutch night owl from the Netherlands, says 5x5. Thank you. Ben is in the Netherlands as well. Thank you for the report. So I will stop thinking about the microphone and the video quality at the moment. We have about 300 watching, and people keep pouring in. You helped me a couple shows ago. Remember, I asked how you early arrivals even know how to find this live stream before I start broadcasting. I think it's real. I think you're right. Many of you said you get a notification from email 30 minutes ahead of time. And that prompts some of you to kind of show up here 15, 20 minutes before I show up. I had no idea that was happening, so that's kind of interesting. Okay. No, you know what? I'll remember to email the guest. I don't need to do it right now. Let me scroll back. You've already punched in a bunch of stuff. I'm scrolling back now. Good morning, or I guess good evening. Anna from Lakau, Finland. Bob's in Kamloops, BC. Hey, special shout out to all the British Columbia residents or the Canadian viewers who've been with us so many times. We're finally talking about your country. I'll do my best. Winnipeg, Manitoba. Kyle's in Reston, Virginia. Gary in Kennewick, Washington. Canadian Entropy in Red Deer, Alberta. I'll keep a special shout out, look out for you guys up there north of the border. Alberta Gary's from, come on Gary, what is it? West of Okotoks. Oh, good Lord. Kirk's in Philomath. The Geek is in Central Alabama. Judy's in Selma, Oregon. Erfurt, Germany, 5x5. Thank you. Steve reports it's time to go snowmobiling. Thank you for checking in. You're excused. Neil's in Clintonville, Pennsylvania. Indupriya Maidur from India. Hello. Hey, I'm glad you're with us today. I don't know if I've seen your name before. Thank you for being from the Deccan Plateau. Wonderful. We're talking a little German chocolate cake today. Flood basalts today. Patrick from Rochester, New York. Tom from the Netherlands. God, we got a lot of the Netherlands people. Seriously. Great. Geneva from Cologne, Germany. Grammy's up in Chelan. Mick's in Eagle, Idaho. Jerome K is in Jarrett, Virginia. Paul's in Vancouver, Washington. I guess I'm down to live now. Let me just let it scroll by, baby. Waikele, Hawaii, Destry Robinson in Seattle, Andy's in Cleveland, Ohio. Go ahead and retype if I missed you already. I'm just playing a game on myself now. Can I remember to email the guest without doing it right away? Oh, I got my thank you I got to do too. Peter says it's 2:50 a.m. in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. So either I'm sorry that you are having a hard time sleeping, Peter, or thank you for setting an alarm to get up in the middle of the night to join us. Or maybe both. No, what? Okay. Thunder Bay, Ontario. Hi, Bruce. Jones in Kamloops, BC. Again, I really hope we can deliver to you British Columbia viewers. We're talking about your backyard today. Cliff's in Philadelphia. Andy's in Vernalis, California. Doug and Kathy in Tagish, Cache Creek North. Hi, Doug and Kathy. David says it's 2:50 a.m. tomorrow. Okay, thank you for that. Jim's Crystal, Minnesota. Troutdale, Oregon. Glen Haven, Colorado. Astoria, Oregon. Gresham, Oregon. Lovely Ballard. Hi, John. Dennis is in Ottawa, Canada. Mount Pleasant, Iowa. Hi, Tim. Dorset, UK. Madison, Wisconsin. Pamela. I've lost track. We got 3 from Kamloops? You guys all know each other? I see Aaron Donaghy is here, it looks like. Hi, Aaron. Morning. Or I guess it's about noon there, huh? Kirk's in Göteborg, Sweden. Carlton, Oregon. Roy from the Netherlands. Govind Kauri from India. Boy, okay. I'm so pleased to have you folks from India joining us. And I don't know how long you've been with us live, but I think I'm just starting to notice it a little bit, so that's really fun. So thanks. Hope you enjoy this today. Lots of Oregonians here. I agree. Virginia, Minnesota. What? Edmonton, Alberta. I'm into playing games with myself here. I'm going to look for 3 more Canadians before I email the guest. How about that? That'll be fun. So Edmonton, Alberta is 1. I just noticed it, Amy, because you have your little Canadian flag there and a smiley face. That's nice. And there's Jim, West Bank, BC. Hi, Jim. That's number 2. And there's Alan from Ipswich, UK. Doesn't count. You do not qualify, Alan. Thanks for playing, though. There we go. Mike's from Red Deer, Alberta. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Let me email the guest, and then we will. I'm going to turn the volume off this thing, of course. Now, email the guest, boy. Email the guest. You can do that. It's not that hard. You've done it a million times before. Oh, I'm prompted to change my password for my email. Hopefully I don't have a problem. Oh, the guest has just texted me and said, have I sent the link? Oh, boy. All right, so let me text him back. Oh, it's a him. Oh, and then he texts back, never mind. Okay. Real-time fun here. Okay, I do want to do my thank you. Change that window. Said hi to a bunch of folks. Live chat is over here. We have 530 and people continue to pour in. Okay, so, I haven't been sharing many of the gifts and nice things that people have been sending me, and I'm not asking for a bunch of that, of course, but it's perfectly timed for today, so I thought I would include this. Dear Nick, I've enclosed a small cut raw sample of Tunk Mountain thulite and a small finished piece, both made by my grandfather, Ronald Hughes of Tonasket, Washington. Grandpa was a florist, grower, and enjoyed a bit of lapidary on the side. I'm going to continue with the letter and then I'll show you. And I wrote this out, Tunk Mountain. I had to Google it. It's up in the Okanagan Nice Dome. That's our show today. And I had to Google thulite. I'd never heard of thulite before. Maybe you have. You're like, oh, come on. You teach geology? You've never heard thulite before? No, I haven't. Oh, well, I knew thulite when I was in 3rd grade. Yeah, I'm sure you did. Just kidding. That's not what Brian... Brian from Paulsbo sent this, by the way. So Brian's talking about his grandpa, Ronald. This stuff has the best looking pink in the world. And the greens and whites are nice too. Hit the cut one with some water to see how it looks. I played around with a piece of it on my grandpa's polishing wheels back then. It's tough and it takes a lot of buffing before it shines. Grandpa found the original boulder of this thulite in the flats around Tunk Mountain. And if I remember correctly, it was found near a fence in the late 60s, probably evacuated from the wheat fields in the area. I can remember watching it being loaded into our old Chevy pickup. I've been enjoying your YouTubes and thought a small token of some of this thulite would be a nice thank you for all the knowledge that I've obtained. It's nice to be learning about, it would be nice to learn about some of the older geology of the Okanagan area. Maybe not as exciting as Chelan, but it has better looking rocks. Thank you, Brian. So let me share with everybody the thulite. And I'm prepared, Brian, to hit it with some water. So we'll do this first. So here's a piece of this thulite from the turtle shell of the Okanagan Dome, part of the metamorphic core complex today. Get out of the frame. I don't know how close I can get in here. So this was cut in Tonasket, Washington by Brian and his grandfather, probably many years ago. And here is a finished piece. Of thulite. I may not even be pronouncing this correctly. Thulite. Thank you, Brian. Makes me want to go up there and explore. And that's really the gimmick of the whole show. There's a drive we're going to do today on Washington State Route 20, which I've never done. But as I've been reading, I got to get up there. So thank you, Brian. Our guest is in the green room. I don't have to worry about that. Nice to see that. Can I double check one more time? I don't know why. You know, I need the iPad today, but I'm chicken. I don't even want to test it once. I just want to get over there and stay over there early before I lose it. Thulite Bismol, like Pepto-Bismol. Yeah. I mean, how much pink stuff exists? Oh, God. I'm going to get these password required messages the whole show. Wonderful. Thank you, John. Thank you. 5x5. Okay, good. Yeah, a couple more hellos and then it's time, isn't it? I can't do more hellos. Give me a minute, would you? Hot mic. Thanks for joining us. We will begin in 1 minute. Hot mic. Okay. If the iPad doesn't work today, boy, you're screwed. So you gotta make it work. I don't know what you gotta do. Like blow on it? What are you gonna do? You gotta get this thing to work. You got photos, you got teasers, you got a story. You need those photos. Okay, so let's just assume that's gonna work. We go there after we set the hook verbally. You don't really know what you're doing today, do you? You really don't know what you're doing. You've got boards laid out. You don't really know the order. Oh boy. Okay. But it's always worked in the past. Even if you don't know exactly what the order is, you're just going to roll with it. You're just going to roll. You're just going to get in the zone. You're going to go. You're going to go. You might be scattered, but that's okay. It feels dumb at the time. It feels super confusing as you're saying it, but then you remember, you watch the replay and it's fine. It's fine. They can follow. So just let it happen. Don't overthink it. By the way, you're late. You got to get started. You got to get started. A pleasant good morning to you all. Thank you for joining us on this session devoted to British Columbia geology. I don't live in British Columbia. I don't know much about the Kamloops Magmas and the Shuswap metamorphic core complex, both up in British Columbia. But I do know a few things about Washington geology, and we know a few things about what's been going on in the Pacific Northwest. This isn't day one. We've been at this a while, right? We're almost done. We've been at this more than 20 sessions, and we've been doing this together. So the first 30 minutes is me using chalkboards, using the iPad, and I need to set the hook. I need to continue our themes, etc. But the gimmick of today's show is our live guest is sitting in British Columbia right now. He knows a lot about British Columbia geology. And so what I'm hoping to do is do some Washington geology and then go to our guest and we just cross the border and continue the story. In other words, we try to just go back and forth over this international border between Washington State and the province of British Columbia. And there'll be new names up there, and there'll be new concepts up there. There'll be different levels of research, different levels of detail in certain places here and there. But it's the same stuff. That's the point. We can not get confused and bothered by all these labels and names and everything else, and just kind of follow the main narratives. I'm doing this, like we're going back and forth. Here's British Columbia, here's Washington. British Columbia, Washington. You're looking at a map right now. Ellensburg here. Okay? That's the plan. God, am I going to the iPad right away? No, I'm not. I'm going to do this. So, I'm going to grab my eraser. So this looks familiar. This is the last show. New title, but it's the last show otherwise. And this is how we framed our discussion with Tekla Harms. Hope you enjoyed that show. I learned a lot from her. And we were talking, the main narrative that we've been working on for quite some time now, since we've been in the Rocky Mountains for quite a few shows. The narrative is we have a major collision with the insular superterrane 100 million years ago, and then there's a compressional story between 100 million years ago and 53 million years ago. And then the idea that we're working on is 53 million years ago, there is a major change, and the crust begins to relax. It begins to extend. And magmas and core complexes are proliferating across the West. Younger than 53. So you know what I'm going to do with my eraser for today's show? Even though there is exposure of older rocks in the Shuswap metamorphic core complex, in the Okanagan gneiss dome, in the Kettle gneiss dome, in the Lincoln gneiss dome, in the Valhalla, in the, look at me, look at Daddy. Even though there's all sorts of older rocks that are talking about these far older stories, I don't think we care about those older stories today. So I'm going to get rid of them. I'm going to get rid of everything I'm going to get rid of everything older than 53 million years ago. We can't juggle too much in our head. That's my call. We can't juggle too much in our head today. There's plenty we're going back and forth between magmas and core complexes, and we're going back and forth between heaven and hell, British Columbia and Washington. Just kidding. So it's gone today. We start our thinking when we are extending the crust. And the magmas and the core complexes are all telling this story. Now, let's go to the whiteboard and remind you of a couple of basics with metamorphic core complexes, and then we go to the iPad. So I didn't erase this from last show. We had the big hunk candy bar. It was cold and frozen. That was brittly deformed crust. Below that, we had ductily deformed warm big hunk candy bar. So we have fractures and faults in the upper cold rock, and the same crust is warmer down here and it's flowing. Good. And there's a big abrupt transition between the brittle and the ductile, and that's where our myelitinization is. That's where we're going to ultimately form these myelinites. So when we get to a metamorphic core complex, my analogy was a turtle shell, aka nice dome, and we have this extension. When's it start? 53 million years ago. Come on now. And that extension is forming this core complex. How? By taking this overlying frozen big hunk, which used to be continuous across the region, and we're going to basically part the waves. Part the waters. What, Red Sea? I don't know, that's dumb, forget it. We're taking this frozen candy bar and separating it, sliding half of it this way and half of it this way. You're like, I can't picture that. Well, here you go, there it is. These two upper plates used to be continuous, and therefore we didn't have any turtle shell exposed. I think I'm emphasizing something I didn't totally emphasize last show. So we can't see the turtle shell here. The turtle shell's right here. We can't see it. But starting in the Eocene, that crazy Eocene, starting 53 million years ago, we start the extension story and we part the waters. I keep saying that. Whatever. I'll stick with it. We cut the frozen big hunk in half. Half slides this way, half slides this way. They slide along the surface of the turtle shell. And as we continue the core complex activity, we see more and more of this emerging turtle shell. But I'm pausing for dramatic effect. Because there's also something happening at the same time during this turtle lifting and frozen big hunk sliding. What is it? A major thing I learned last show is that at the same time magmas are rising up through the frickin' turtle shell. Dave Rogers, the text from Dave Rogers in the last show says, even if you don't see a bunch of plutons in the turtle shell today, I'm talking about metamorphic core complexes, right? Even if you don't see the magmas in the metamorphic core complex today, they're down there at depth. And Tekla, who was one of the world's experts on metamorphic core complexes, agreed that these plutons invading from below during extensional time is a hallmark of these things. I didn't have that before. I didn't have that. I thought it was just pure turtle shell, pure metamorphic rock exposed in this dome, this nice dome. But I hope you can now see why we're talking about both of these at the same time, because even though these are very different kinds of rocks, we know what magmas look like if they are plutons, if they're plutonic igneous rocks. There's a pluton, there's an igneous rock with the crystals that are nice and big because this magma cooled slowly. I don't know, if you're a beginner in geology, we've been talking about plutons the entire winter. Do you know this is what we're talking about? That's what a plutonic igneous rock looks like. Whether it's the Golden Horn or the Cooper Mountain or the Railroad Creek. But what does a sample of the metamorphic core complex look like? It looks like this. This is a piece of Shuswap that I forgot that I had, but my guest reminded me that I collected this. So I found it in the lab yesterday. Didn't bother labeling it, so of course I'm a moron. But I found it. Are we in the myelitinized zone? I'm not sure. Is this an orthogneiss, which is common within the Shuswap? I'm not sure. I'm guessing mylotonized, but I don't know. Okay. He goes to the iPad. Hey! Promising. Promising. Pick it up, boy. Pick it up. Hey, this is session X. We got 2 shows left. I'll see you next Wednesday at 2 p.m., and I'll see you a week from this morning for the grand finale. Moving on. I got 3 papers waiting for you today. As per usual, we go to the Eocene, and I won't even bother clicking on these, but you know how to get to these papers by now. So I have 3 papers, one brand new, written by a Canadian geologist over in eastern Canada, even though she did her work out here in the West. Sarah Brown, 2016. I don't know her, and I don't know much of her story, but she has a relatively recent paper on the Shuswap. And then, look who we got. Stacia Gordon, our old friend from a few weeks ago, no, a few shows ago. There's her master's thesis as well. So these are my titles. Let's go to Stacia here quick. So, there's all sorts of detail here. Stacia did her master's with Donna Whitney on the Valhalla complex, which is part of the Shuswap metamorphic complex. But I feel like I can play a little bit today with you because I have these papers waiting for you. I think I do want to use Google Earth just to show you how quickly we can get up to this area. Yeah, do this really quick, man, because I'm talking to myself. Do this quick because I've got a chalkboard set up to do this. So this is Ellensburg, and if I keep scrolling out here, it's so nice to have the iPad again. Blue dot, that's where I am. So you can see that to cross the border from Ellensburg is not that far. You're like, well, I don't know how much of a drive that is. It's less than 4 hours. It's less than a 4-hour drive on US 97 to leave Ellensburg, and just you take one highway, you go all the way up. So there's really no excuse that I haven't been up in BC way more than I have, but it's just a handful of times I've been up there, and that's part of my story with the photos, and I think I have the iPad, so let's go to it. I say let's go to it, boy. Presentations, MCC. So once upon a time, there was a beautiful sky in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia, right across the border. And if you're a longtime fan of this channel, or even a fan of this channel since last fall, you remember that I tagged along on a field trip, and this is the field trip I was tagging along on. Jerome Lesemann from Vancouver Island University invited me to join him. It was tricky to get across the border back then, but I got across, and I hung out and camped with these guys for a couple of nights, and I learned a lot about Ice Age geology. Ice Age geology, that's Jerome's specialization. But as we were doing the trip, here's my route. So again, 3 hours and 45 minutes, and I went up through Dry Falls country. Here's Jerome, and I was focused on the Ice Age, because that's Jerome's specialization, and it was an Ice Age field trip, and the class was devoted to looking at drumlins and all sorts of features that were created at the base of the ice sheet. But here's the first morning of our trip, right next to our campsite, and I'm looking at this stuff. I'm like, maybe I was a good person and I waited until Jerome was done talking, but probably not. And I probably said, is that one of those core complexes over there? He's like, yeah, that's the Shuswap. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't even heard that name, Shuswap Metamorphic Complex, since I was a grad student 35 years ago. He's like, yeah, that's it. And so, in the middle of this wonderful British Columbia, Okanagan area, Kelowna, Summerland, Osuyos, that's things like that, Oliver, in the middle of all that is this exposed metamorphic rock, which I knew absolutely nothing about then. I know a little bit more now. Oh, there's the gift letter from Brian. Thank you, Brian. So here's one of my main messages today, and our guest will expand on this as well. I think we're not going to be worried about a bunch of individual little names, bunch of little local names. I think we want to realize that this Shuswap metamorphic complex is the main story that is quite large. And this is new for me, to realize that some of the exposure of metamorphic rocks in northern Washington has plugged right into this major thing called the Shuswap. That's one of the main things we're going to try to do today, I think. We'll see what the guest wants to do, but I think that's a theme. Now, last night, Eric from BC, who is slowly becoming, or quickly becoming the new backcountry Gary, but the Canadian version. So Eric, thank you. Eric just said these might help. I took some photos a few years ago up in the Shuswap, some local names I can't remember, sorry Eric, and I just tossed them into this keynote here. But this is the kind of country in the Shuswap, whether you're in Valhalla or what was it, Monagee or something, provincial provinces as I understand it. And Eric basically said in his email, yeah, it kind of makes a little more sense to me now why these rocks look kind of like bruised. I think that was his word. I never understood why these rocks look kind of bruised. Well, it's a core complex. It's the lower plate. We're looking at the turtle shell, man. The upper brittle stuff has been slid away, and that's what I want to do on the chalkboards and talk about where the stuff slid. So thank you, Eric, from, I forget where you're living, Eric in BC somewhere with these wonderful photos. Oh my God. So alpine glaciation as well. I don't know about you, but I got cabin fever, baby. I haven't been out of this valley since November. I'm ready to hit the road. No offense, but I'm ready. I'm ready to have a different schedule, which means no schedule. It's been fun, but I'm ready to hit the open road. Yeah, let's not do too much of this here, but this is a little sneak peek at a diagram from a paper that we will share next Saturday, which is a brand new paper that just got published. And the pinks are core complexes. So do I have my pointer here? Shuswap, Okanagan, Nice Dome, Valhalla, Kettle Dome. I'm saying, I'm not the only one, that this is all one story. This is all one Shuswap story. But if you can get your bearings, this is the crystalline core of the Chelan block. Stacia Gordon, the rest of the dream team, Chris Mattinson down here last Saturday morning. And here's the Straight Creek Fault taking that Chelan block and offsetting it and having more of it going up into the Coast Mountains batholith country of Robinson Cecil. So there's some regional ties that I probably will not try to get too crazy with, but of course I can't help it. I'm going to flirt a little bit with that. Okay, this is what we're doing today before we go to our guest. I want to take a drive with you. And as I said before we started for real, I've never taken this drive. I have never, I'm embarrassed to say that, I've never driven Washington State Route 20 between Tonasket on the west and Kettle Falls on the east with Republic, Washington. This is Washington. We're not in British Columbia yet. I just want to do this drive with a bunch of pieces of paper I'm going to hold up to the camera and a couple of things on the chalkboard, but I just want to do this drive with you because we're driving across one big ass turtle shell. Sorry, Patrick. And then we go and go north of the border and find that thing as well. Now, before we lose the iPad, remember Maps by Chelsea back in Montana gave us a really interesting look at a metamorphic core complex on the left. That's the turtle shell, of course. The frozen big hunk is sliding eastward. That's the Sapphire Mountains in Montana. What if we flip it around? Same image, but reversed, right? What if this thing on the right is the Shuswap, and we have a west-dipping detachment fault? And what if a bunch of the bedrock immediately west of Tonasket, you'll see what I mean with all the maps I have for you, what if that's really the story in northern Washington and ultimately southern BC? Because these are photos from northern Washington where we have, I mean, you don't even have to squint to see it, do you? There's the turtle shell. There's the top to the west, meaning that's the frozen big hunk, the upper plate that slid to the west. And from the paper today, we've got these corrugations on this Shuswap, and there in the lower left is this upper plate that slid. I didn't have this before. I didn't have the bedrock geology in northern Washington, west of Tonasket, Washington, being stuff that slid. I should have, but it's a new thought since, Bijou and I were thinking about it early this morning. But look at this. This is from Roadside Geology of Washington, right at Tonasket, Washington. And if you cross into BC, same concept. Turtle shell on the right, that's the lower plate. Frozen big hunk, upper plate on the left. There's volcanics thrown in there, the Penticton group of volcanics. And the milotonized zone at that major detachment, that shear zone. Okay, so I'm pleased with that. Maybe you are too. Next challenge, can I get off of the iPad and unplug it without the camera freezing? Let's go back to this. I am frozen. This is fun. All right, be patient with me. Are you still with me? In the live chat, are you still with me? Delay in the comments. Kyle, you're still there. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to unplug the phone. Thank you. I'm going to unplug the phone and replug it in and see if I can get unfrozen. Come on, you son of a... Okay, I just need to pause for just another second. Are we good? You can see me. I'm a live camera. I'm a live video, and you can still hear me as well. Are we 5 by 5? Good. Okay, no more iPad. We're done with that. Okay, pick it up. This looks familiar. Not going to say much about it, except with the Tekla show, the last show, we were looking at a classic look, almost a too perfect of a look of a metamorphic core complex, right? And then thinking about the North Cascades, which I will be doing just a touch, maybe either right before we go to the guest or maybe when the guest is with us. Okay, fine. Also did not erase this from last time. But you remember that regionally, south of the border, here's the border with British Columbia, distant viewers, Okanagan, Kettle, Priest River, Bitterroot, these are each turtle shells that have emerged because the upper plate has broken and slid away in both directions, or at least one direction. Okay, not super helpful to us today. But I'm going to keep hitting this main theme, which is I don't think we really need to bother with individual turtle names. It's one big turtle is what I'm saying, and I'm hoping to show you right now a couple of images that way. So if you like that, I don't know, I might back off of it, but that's really what I'm trying to do here now. I like what I did here, so maybe you will too, especially if you're watching from a long way away and you've never really have kind of looked at a map on how a couple of these things fit together. So this is the state of Washington. I'm going to do some basic geography, especially for those in distant lands who could really, it'd be nice to see some of this. I just have to say it. Remember, we're late in the alphabet, so we're combining new thoughts, new ideas with trying to wrap some things together, as I promised. So German chocolate cake are the Columbia River flood basalts that started 16 million years ago. So way too young for our story, but they are on this map because they're a problem, right? This is what we're looking at today, and certainly this continues for more than Washington, but we have no idea what it looks like under there. Ellensburg, center of the universe here, town of Chelan, town of Tonasket, town of Republic, town of Kettle Falls, Spokane, Washington, Seattle, Washington, Portland, Oregon, Vancouver, BC, Vancouver Island. This is the big turtle. The Shuswap that extends south across the border between these two. These are two detachment faults. This is the Okanagan detachment fault. This is the Kettle detachment fault. So I'm going to say that, warning, the next 5 minutes I'm going to say the same phrases over and over again, but I want to show you this at different scales. So these are the two upper plates that used to be together, and it's almost like an elevator door or something. We're going to open the elevator and allow the turtle shell to emerge. I didn't have that till right now. That's kind of cool. You can just open the elevator doors, and it's not passively sitting there. The elevator doors are opening as the turtle is emerging. And then, of course, magmas are coming up through the whole thing as well. Okay, let's leave that. How do I want to do this? Okay. Geologic map of Washington showing roughly the same thing. And again, what I'm trying to do is take all this busy little details, little colors, and trying to find a broad theme that we can sink our teeth into. And what's the black line with the 3 dots? That's our drive, Washington 20. Tonasket, Republic, Kettle Falls. I'm going to keep showing you that. Yeah. Here's a little thing I did with my colored pencils almost exactly 2 years ago in the front porch, February of 2020, and I was preparing for a downtown lecture. And then I didn't give the lecture as scheduled in April. You know why? Nothing happened starting March of 2020. So I'm back to some of these things. So there's our drive, Washington 20, Tonasket to Kettle Falls. You see there's a couple of passes there. Wakonda Pass, is that how you say it? Or Wakona Pass and Sherman Pass. The red arrows, upper plate sliding away from the Shuswap turtle emerging. Roadside Geology of Washington, written by Marley Miller and Darrell Cowan. A cross-section showing the same thing. Driving Tonasket, Republic, Kettle Falls, emerge the turtle shell. Yeah, sure, there's some other stuff going on. The EG are Chalice magmas, otherwise known as Kamloops magmas. The KTG, that's Cretaceous, we're ignoring it. Grabens, huh? Republic Graben, Torado Creek Graben. What's a graben? That's a basin with a bunch of sediment, a la the Chumstick Basin, Aaron Donaghy, special shout out. In the most simple view, these two grabens, these two yellow things, are just simple normal faults that allow a portion of the turtle shell in two places to drop and have sediments accumulate during the Eocene. But I guess I'm starting to wonder right now, is there some transtension with those two grabens? I don't know. Are we too far east to have transtension as opposed to just pure dip slip? He asks himself. I already forgot. Did I already show you this one? I don't think so. There are those two grabens again. The two yellow grabens are deep ditches that have formed in cracks in the turtle shell as the turtle shell has been emerging during the Eocene. I think you got it by now, but I got two more. I think. This is how my brain works. I don't know about yours, but I just keep changing scales. I kind of keep having the same story, but I just look for that story in different scales, and I guess it's confusing to some because we keep zooming in and zooming out and zooming in and zooming out, but for me it works. Guest, give me 5 more minutes and I'm ready for you. Maybe 10. Now this I found in I think a viewer sent this to me. Thank you for that. Okanagan Geology South. Geologic highlights of the South Okanagan, British Columbia. And there's many good things in here, including one of the cartoons I showed. But this is a sketch map from Okulich. I don't know who the geologist Okulich is, in 1984, but this sketch in its entirety is here. And I'm going to show it to you on the paper copy that I have. But notice the Washington, British Columbia line, and notice how much north, how far north we go with what I think is all the Shuswap, but again, maybe our guest or somebody else will talk me out of it. You know what I found most eye-catching with that? Of course, the southern part of it. There's our drive with the 3 towns. But look what, I assume it's a he, look what he's got here. I need to think more about this, but I think this guy, who I assume is a British Columbia geologist, is taking some of the Shuswap and bringing it right into North Cascades country. I think. Or at least it's Chris Mattinson country with that Chelan, I think. Anyway, that seems new to me. I don't think I've seen anybody else do that kind of west. Remember, with the Chris Mattinson show, it was kind of a gray zone. Like Chris was like, I'm doing this interesting work, I think, but like I'm off of somebody's map, I'm off of somebody else's map, and it's just maybe a question of kind of having a new map that somehow it'd be nice for me, I think, and others to potentially see North Cascades through the Okanagan batholith into this Okanagan Shuswap metamorphic core complex and see and think more about the connections, the geographic, the geologic, the temporal connections between North Cascades, Chris Mattinson country, and then this topic today. Now, we got a lot of Canadian viewers and they're like, this guy won't stop talking about the U.S. You're right. We're almost there. You're in northern Washington, you want to go visit Republic. It's famous for stone rose fossils, plant fossils. I don't know, do those plant fossils continue across the border? They must. Do those grabens continue across the border? Those sediments continue across the border? They must. They must. Gene Humphreys, who is a tomographer, University of Oregon. Oh boy. This one caught my eye many years ago. And he's grouping things using the American parlance, that's French, chalice, which turns into Kamloops north of the border. But notice the black things, those are the core complexes. And he's putting a simple story with the accretion of siletzia. Please don't forget, have you lost sight of the main theme of much of the first half of the alphabet? Why do we have the crazy Eocene? Answer, siletzia hit us. Let's not forget. And I don't know exactly what we're doing in the next show, but I think we'll be revisiting some of that plate tectonic stuff. If you're wanting to ultimately talk about why is all this crazy stuff happening tectonically. We haven't been there lately, and I'm not even sure we'll be there today. Last piece of paper, I'm telling myself, cutting myself off, and then we go to the guest. You might remember Jeff Tepper. he was on twice. And he was the guy who was looking at Eocene magmas in northern Washington. And do you remember his map that he made specially for us? I'm pretty sure that he did this specifically for us. First of all, I've got Washington 20 for you so you can see it. The red lines are our detachment faults. The red arrows are the upper plate sliding away. But what we're really looking at here are the Eocene plutons in brown. And notice he's got Eocene volcanic rocks in the Republic Graben. So that sandbox where the plant fossils are coming from also has volcanic rocks. But I'm just reminding you that Jeff had that really cool age sweep, 52 to 44 by the time you get into the Central Cascades. And you might have to go back and watch that show. I guess it was just called Chalice Magmas, but he had a tectonic model of breaking the Farallon plate once and then twice, and then having that falling ocean plate that's broken underneath the Pacific Northwest explain this age sweep from northeast to southwest. Jeff Tepper, I don't think, has ever been in BC trying to follow those Eocene magmas. Pretty sure that's true. So I don't know, maybe Jeff will see this show at some point and we'll kind of go, well, I don't know, maybe I should go up there and find some new Eocene rocks to sample and do geochem and high precision dating on. Okay. That's enough. No, it's not. Guest, please, one more. God. I don't even see the guest. Oh, he's there. Okay. So guest, I'm sorry, 3 more minutes. I don't know if this is going to be of interest to us at all, but you remember the Robinson Cecil show where she was in the Coast Mountains batholith, which, as I understand it, is away from our story today generally, but maybe it's not. But she emphasized more than once, Robinson did, that the most voluminous of the 4 magmatic flare-ups in the Coast Mountains batholith of British Columbia, the most voluminous were the youngest, were the Eocene guys, starting 61 and ending 45. Now that surprised me because I've double-checked with Mike Eddy, and he doesn't think that our North Cascades, our Eocene magmas, are the most voluminous necessarily. But also there's a difference, of course, in ages. And next Saturday, when we visit with the Dream Team all together, as in the thrilling conclusion of the series, I suppose we'll be getting into these lulls, these times when it's just spooky quiet, magmatically. And as I understand it, the lull in the Coast Mountains batholith is happening while there's pretty significant magma production in the North Cascades, and vice versa. When there's a significant lull between 60 and 50 million years ago in the North Cascades of Washington, there apparently is major flare-ups in British Columbia. Again, not right across the border now, but to the west, I guess. But if we restore those strike-slip faults, maybe there is more of a connection geographically than I think. And if that's true, then why don't we have things syncing up here? Just throwing it out there as an idea. Okay, guest, thank you. You have been extra patient. Guests, have you guessed oh, there's Aaron. Have you guessed the guest? We need somebody who knows British Columbia geology, who speaks some of the same language that I do. And to do that, I think we need to go to Vancouver Island University. Jerome Lesemann, how are you this morning?
Good. How are you doing? Doing well.
I'm doing great. Wonderful. Thank you. You're making your triumphant return. You were the first guest we ever had on this thing back in November, and here you are again on a Saturday morning. How How are we doing with audio and video on your end? Okay.
Looks okay. I can see.
All right. Well, you're a little choppy at the moment, but maybe it'll settle down. I think we're okay. It was great to visit with you briefly last night before this morning. Can you give us, first of all, a sense? You're not doing research on the metamorphic car complexes or the magmas, or are you?
No, not at all. Like, not
Okay.
even close. Not even close. And we were joking last night that I know enough to get myself into real trouble with the experts. Okay, so.
Well, that makes two of us. And
Yes.
we're not afraid to be that bold. And we are involving you because, as opposed to maybe the last few guests who've had this very deep, regimented knowledge in a particular area, you're a teacher. I mean, you do research, but it's Ice Age geology, so you know that Okanagan country from that point of view. So how much of these themes that I'm talking about today, how much have you been teaching about these two subjects, and has it been in the field or the classroom or both?
It's been both. I mean, I think one thing that we'll get to today is just it's extremely difficult to untangle all the events. Like the same way that you break it down into episodes on a topic. The reality is when you're out anywhere trying to understand the geology, it's extremely difficult to disentangle all the pieces together because they overprint each other, they move on top of each other, you know. So you kind of have to have a bit of a regional perspective on where things are and the big picture view of things, and have a bit of a bit of a regional understanding of events without being able to get into the details of, the minutia of the geochemistry and how, so that's where it stems from. It's like, this is my province, this is where we teach, it's extremely hard. I mean, as much as we think there's 1,000 kilometers from here to the Rockies, what we realize is that what's happening on the coast over time has a direct linkage to what happens 800 kilometers to the east and vice versa. So you can't deal with one part without dealing with the whole to some degree. So you kind of have to have an understanding that way. And
you do, and you do a great job of disentangling, as you say. So I thoroughly enjoyed that field trip, and yes, it was an Ice Age trip, but you were doing a fair amount talking about the bedrock. Why do you do that? If it's an Ice Age trip, why are you spending as much time as you do with some of that bedrock of the Okanagan?
Well, I mean, there's a number of reasons. The main one is we're there, so why not?
Yeah.
Well, but it's true because the students that I take on a field trip, we're here on Rangelia country, and so what they see the most are flood basalts and some sedimentary rocks from the NIMO group. But you drive across the CPC, and then you get into different terrains, which they're aware of, but they haven't initially stepped foot on.
Yeah.
And then you've got new rocks that are equally, intriguing and perplexing, and then you realize, well, they're kind of connected. And the other thing is that it gets students. Students ask you often. You get students from all over. I'm sure it's the same at your college, university. You have students that I've had a student from Kamloops that said, "Oh, I think there's volcanic rocks in my backyard." I said, "Yes, there are," and somewhere. The answer can be, yep, those are basalts, and that's the end of the story. Or say, yeah, those are basalts, and actually they kind of happen at a time when the province is being stretched like a giant piece of taffy. And so, the answer becomes a new set of questions. Like, well, why is that happening? So it's not entirely clear, but it's actually pretty interesting because, there's sort of these events that telescope beyond just where they live. And so it just generates more questions, which is really what we're trying to do, you're doing.
Yes, well, you do a great job with that too, and you're so well read, and you're sending me papers regularly, so you're up on the latest, and I think you just feel like that's your job as an instructor.
But it's interesting. That's the bottom line, right? Yeah. I just find it fascinating. It's just fascinating, even though it's so far removed from what I typically will think about more and write about. It's just fascinating, and so I don't know, why not?
Yeah. Right. So last preliminary question then. So that field trip I joined you on was like a long weekend essentially in October. Yeah. Do you do that every year? Have you been doing that for years and years?
No, the course that you came on is a course that I teach every other year, every 2 years.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And some years I've gone on the field trip, some years I haven't. It depends on what else I'm teaching, depends on the number of students, depends on a bunch of factors.
Yeah.
I try to, because there's usually a lot of really interesting, ice age work in the interior of BC, like where we were in the Okanagan and other places.
Right.
But sometimes I vary the route or I go elsewhere, but yeah.
Good. Okay, well, so you know your stuff for sure, and we want to somehow cross the border from what I was doing casually with, first of all, do you like the main message that we lump everything as a Shuswap, or do you see value in separating out those individual domes for some reason?
I think the answer is both. I think the answer is depends on the level of question you're asking.
Okay.
So, or the level of detail that your questions are requiring in terms of answers. Yeah. But I don't think it's wrong to view the Shuswap as one enormous system composed of multiple domes or areas. And I think even Tekla Harms on the show said it's the granddaddy of all metamorphic core complexes, and I think it's arguably the largest in the world or something, depending on where you put the boundary.
Right.
The Shuswap complex is just enormous. Bottom line, it's just really big.
And the timing, I guess I failed to do that with the chalkboards, but the timing of the detachments, the timing of the sliding, the age of the plutons, that's an easy continuation of the story, right? We don't have to get into details of precise dates, but we're in the same neighborhood.
We are. I mean, I think that's one of the fascinating things that what comes out today is, and we'll sort of use some of the maps, but there is there are clear geographic overlaps between the areas we're talking about and the different events, the volcanism, the extension, the core complexes, and so on. But there's also a chronological overlap with all of these. So, it's more at that point, it's often more than just a coincidence that things happen in the same place at the same time. So there's a linkage probably. And so, yeah. But we'll talk dates. We'll probably be in the same sort of plus or minus 3 or 4 million years that you've been using, and that's really like there's a window where all this happens, and then at the end of your show you can get Mike Eddy to tell you which day of the week it happened on, but that kind of
right.
But
well, you mentioned maps. Do you have some maps you could show us?
Yes, I do. We'll try it out. We'll see how well that works. Maybe I'll just introduce what I'm trying to do here. So we'll try to use Google Earth. What I've done is I've shamelessly copied a bunch of maps from the articles that you have posted and others. And what I've done is I'm going to try to overlay them on the Google Earth so that we have both the diagram and we have the topography underneath. Because I think one of the biggest hurdles to making sense of all these is just really like getting a handle on the scale of and the distribution and the areas that we're talking about. Because maps on a chalkboard are great, but the spatial reference frame is really important to get just to appreciate just scale of events. And when we're talking about tectonic plates, the areas that are encompassed by all these processes. So we'll try it. We'll see how it works.
You know how to do this, huh? You know how to take an overlay and put it onto Google Earth.
Yes, I do. It's actually pretty straightforward. Yeah. And you do it once. Okay.
I'm excited.
So let's go.
I've
got a few. So let me just start with. We'll have to share in a second.
Drum roll, please.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we tested this a little bit, and we'll do our best with the full screen thing and all that. But we'll come on now. It's just a couple of teachers. We're doing our best to make this work for you all. How many we got? We got almost 1,000 watching you. And okay, Jerome. So I see you in the green room. Do you feel like the window is ready to be shared?
I think so. That should work.
Okay, everybody, you ready for this? This is another big moment. Jerome always has something new up his sleeve. You remember last time he took us on a frickin' walk around his lab room, but this is the new wrinkle for today. Let's do it. Okay, Google Earth, I recognize it.
Okay, so a little bit of geography. We're looking at, if you see my cursor, I think you do. The hand is right on the Okanagan Valley. So if we go into south, we're into northern Washington and onto the German chocolate cake on the flood basalt of the Columbia.
Attaboy.
So the area we want to, I'll try not to be too choppy and not move too
No,
quickly.
I think it's great, man. Yeah, I have noticed a little choppiness with motion, but we can live with that. Let's go.
Okay, so let's just go with the Shuswap first.
Good.
So this is what I've done is I've basically kind of rubber sheeted the figure, the map onto Google Earth, and so I can also play around. I'll open up the window, but I can play with transparency, so we can see more or less topography underneath. And so the main message here is that anything pink, orange, purple, and actually goes beyond the boundaries of this map, that's Shuswap Metamorphic Core Complex. That's if you take the big picture view of the Shuswap, that's what it is. So you're looking at
God.
A solid third of the province of British Columbia, at least in the southern half, is the Shuswap. And it continues south. You can see it goes across the border. So that's an extension of that system. And presumably, some of it must extend beneath, I would guess, beneath the flood basalts of the Columbia.
It has to, right? Yes.
Because you said that you can map some of those rocks at the Grand Coulee Dam. And so right there, you're on the edge of the flood basalts.
Exactly.
And they go, there's outcrops of that, I think some of those rocks right into the Grand Coulee. So there's an extension of that below somewhere.
Hey, before we lose this zoomed out look, can you use your cursor and show us where you live?
Oh, yes. Right now, I am just here where the hand is.
Okay, good.
Right
Nanaimo.
there. Yeah. It's not. I took the names off the map, or some of the names, but
oh, that's good.
they're on the post here.
So I'm dying to zoom in if we can. It's kind of a small postage stamp at the moment, but this is, oh, baby. Oh, come on, Jerome.
So the Shuswap, the way to think about the Shuswap complex is that it's really composed of a number of domes or the areas or zones. So if you have read anything about the Shuswap, or people have heard about the Shuswap, some of the names that come up is the Valhalla complex. There's the Thor Odin Dome. That's this area here where the hand is right now. There's another one for another place called Frenchman's Cap. So there's a number of, let's call them centers. You have the Okanagan Dome as well. You've got a few other places that just are really kind of think of them as centers, but they're exposed or they've been exhumed or exposed at the surface. And that's really how we're kind of putting together this very large boundary around the Shuswap.
Okay.
Okay, that works so far?
So we have names for the two major detachments. We have Okanagan Detachment on the west and Kettle Detachment on the east. Do you have major detachment names? Yeah,
so Okanagan Valley, the name varies. Okanagan Valley Fault, Okanagan Valley Detachment, Shear Zone.
Okay.
I think that's basically more trying to capture the process happening along that boundary, but really it's the same area. The Okanagan Valley is the most prominent in southern BC, but it's actually something that extends further north. So you can see on this map, it says OVER. So it's commonly thought of as the Okanagan Valley Eagle River detachment. And then on the east side, the bulk of the Shuswap complex and the eastern boundary, if you think of it that way, is what they call the Columbia Fault, pardon me.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, along where the Columbia River is, before it crosses the border. So those would be sort of the two major bounding areas for the Shuswap complex.
Well, I got to interrupt you for a second, especially since you're an Ice Age guy. It can't be a coincidence that these major bodies of water are on these two detachment faults, or is it?
No, I don't think so. I mean, anytime you have faults, now we have to fast forward in time quite a bit, but
like 49 million years, but
yes,
I mean,
but that's fine. That's okay. I mean, that's just part of the deal. That's part of the interesting thing.
Wow.
Anytime you have these major faults and you have structural control, you tend to find that these are areas where you accentuate erosion.
Dang.
When you map out every major fault system in BC, you also effectively map out every major valley system in BC. Jeez. So you have the Rocky Mountain Trench further to the east. You've got a number of these lakes: Christina Lake, Arrow Lakes, Okanagan Valley. The continuous Shuswap Lake is sort of this area up here where the cursor is. That's an extension of the same fault system in many ways. The Fraser Fault, even though it doesn't have a lake in it, is a major area of incision from the Fraser River. So yeah, there's a very close correspondence to between erosion, and it's not exclusively ice erosion. It's those faults have been around for a long time. So we've gone through multiple episodes of fluvial to glacial to fluvial to glacial. So yeah, I think that makes total sense.
So one more. So far we're not talking about magmas. This is all these colors are just different portions of the turtle shell?
Yeah, I think that's also part of the challenge in really capturing the idea of these metamorphic core complexes, that we're looking at metamorphosed rocks, but the protoliths have various origins, right? There's metamorphism of plutons at sometimes, terrain rocks, North American margin rocks, depending where you are in the metamorphic core complex, and especially if you extend to the southeast into northern Idaho, Montana, you start encountering different rocks in different places. So sometimes it gets a little confusing because we're mapping metamorphic rocks that we're mapping the distribution of metamorphosed rocks, let's put it that way. But the protoliths have a range of ages. So that becomes tricky to sort of put all the pieces together over time, because we're dealing with sometimes really, really old rocks, much older than just Eocene rocks.
I totally agree, and that's I guess my way of coping with that this morning is to erase it. Remember that first board? We're just like, let's get anything older than 53. Those are amazing stories, Quinellia, accretion, intermontane, but to me, if we just get rid of it and start really focusing on stuff younger than 53, then we can find some of the themes we want, at least for today. I just go limp, man. I just go numb if we start juggling all this other stuff way earlier. I can't do it. Maybe you can. I can't do it, man. Okay. Thank you for that.
Let's keep going.
Good.
So turn that one off. Let's go look at, we'll come back to the Okanagan Valley in a bit, but let's go look at a specific part of the Shuswap complex. So we'll go into that purple area. Just as one example of, also just to appreciate the complexity of the geology that the mapping requires, but also the tectonic reconstructions also require. So if I'll just display a small portion of the Thor Odin Dome. So you can notice already the change in scale that we're dealing with here. So the next overlay is just a tiny little portion of this lower purple part, which is itself an important but relatively small portion of the total Shuswap complex.
Wow.
So let's go into the Thor Odin Dome.
So we're south of Revelstoke?
Yeah, we're just south of Revelstoke. I can also do a thing where I can sort of pivot through a bit. And that way.
Look, now you're just showing off.
Yes, I am. But, here we are.
Wow. Well, that's the power of the Google Earth thing. I mean, to see it from the side is amazing. Can you keep zooming in? I'm just getting greedy now.
Yeah, I can. At some point, we'll reach the resolution of the overlay, but
Oh, my God.
So that area, I mean, for scenery alone, it's an area that's worth visiting. But if you throw in the complex geologic history, it's just fascinating. But this is, I'll go back to an overhead plan view, and the colors really reflect different types of rocks that have been partially detached and exposed. So it's, one of the, for me anyways, but I think everybody can appreciate this at this point, one of the incredible aspects of Tekla Harms' description is just how much crustal material gets piled up, right? This idea of this topographic head that's produced on. We're talking tens of kilometers of rocks that are then going to relax and start extending. So the amount of bedrock, right? You're not just going to this area and mapping a single set of plutonic rocks. You're talking about dozens and dozens of rock units that have been deformed to varying degrees at different times and intruded also at different times.
What's the name of that provincial park? I can't read that.
That's Monashee Provincial Park. So it's part of the Monashee Mountains. Yeah, this is
I think I think those were some of Eric's photos that we looked at on the iPad.
Yeah.
So thank
They
you,
look
Eric,
like
for that.
They look like it. So the Montmachis are really this range of mountains that you see there.
I see.
Continuing.
God, I got to get up there.
Which matches very closely or very nicely with some of those major dome structures in the Shuswap. So Thor Odin, Valhalla complex. It's all along this spine, basically.
Huh. Okay, this is great, man. Thank you so much. I don't know how much time it took you to do this, but man, what a gift. Thank you.
It's once you've done it once, it's pretty, like anything. The second
right.
time is not much faster. Maybe we can go back to the Okanagan.
Sure.
Since we're talking about the shear zone, so I'll just sort of spin myself around again.
This is a blast.
If it's working, I'll keep going. Here we go. Where am I? Here am I. There we go. So this is a paper, an image out of Sarah Brown's paper that's coming out of her. That's a product of her PhD thesis work, and she's done a lot of work, interesting kind of novel ways of thinking about this Okanagan Valley shear zone.
Okay.
And one of the big outcomes, or one of her big conclusions, is just how significant the Okanagan Valley area is in terms of accommodation. So I think one of her main conclusions, she's sort of, if there are two hypotheses, is that there's minor amount of displacement along the shear zone. In other cases, it could be much more. And I think she leans towards the much more end of things. And by that, we mean, somewhere on the order of, in the many tens of kilometers of displacement, 60 to potentially up to 80 something kilometers of displacement. And I think that's vertical, like it's along the major detachment or décollement surfaces that happen. So we're talking about this being the western boundary of the Shuswap complex. I don't know about the long strike displacement. I'm not sure about that. Yeah. Since you're bringing it up. The picture you showed early on about the trip in the fall, we're looking at, we're on one side of the Okanagan Lake, and then we're looking across the lake. On the beach. So we were basically where the S is on this map, and we were looking across the lake to this area called Okanagan Mountain.
God, that was so cool. And to now know we were right on that detachment fault camping, I just obviously didn't have that. So it's all that upper plate stuff to the west, right, of that main road, that valley bottom. Oh, okay.
Plus an overprinting of volcanics, which we'll get to in a minute. The yellow zones here are volcanics. Okay, so these are most of them are Eocene volcanics in the yellow. But anything that's orangey or pink, gray, green, that's all core complex. It's all lumped into the large Shuswap core complex.
Right.
There are some plutons. In fact, the area we were really looking at, this zone, orange zone here, that's a plutonic body inside the core complex. But, much like the Okanagan Dome and some of the other domes, they're kind of, again, depending on the scale of your question and the way you're looking at it, it's all lumped into the Shuswap. Or you can differentiate it if you're really interested in some of the specifics of the timing and of emplacement or timing of deformation. One of the outcomes of, I think, the work that Sarah Brown has done from her thesis and her paper is that she is recognizing these major, and they're on this map, these major red and blue lines, what she calls reentrance and salience. So basically big, what she calls corrugations, big, for lack of a better term, big fold structures that define major kind of physiographic parts of the landscape. So that picture that you showed, that was great because it's a very undulating, wavy surface, and there's definitely been some erosion over multiple glacial periods, but there's an underlying imprint or a structural imprint that produces a lot of that pattern.
Was that new to you? Like before her work, you were like trying to make sense of those swales and thinking maybe it was all ice related or water related?
I think it was, I think I was thinking of it or looking at it from the standpoint of, absence of sediment on that surface and probably a lot of erosion and abrasion. And I guess I did have an idea, or I was integrating the idea that there's some structural components to it. But when I look at this map, and it's mapped out so clearly with the axes of these sort of fold structures, so you basically think of them as anticlines and synclines in sequence. So you're going anticline in blue, syncline, anticline, syncline, over simplistic, but it matches extremely well with where you see major humps and major depressions. And it's in the diagram that you showed early on, where you have the extension in the dome rising, the turtle shell rising. The turtle shell is wrinkled, and so those are the wrinkles.
I don't know if you can see me right now, but
There
they're
it is.
east-west trending things, which
you got it. That's it exactly. That's the diagram.
Yeah. Can we zoom in on your map to see those blue and red lines just now that we're zeroing in on those? Because that's kind of, oh, good. Yeah, right there. Look at that.
So I think what I can do too, here, let me just spin myself around. You'll see how they match. Oh. They match topographic highs and lows, right? So the blue lines especially match nicely at Okanagan Mountain and a bit further south of Penticton, and on we go to all of our areas.
It's even the Okanagan Valley gets tight as it's trying to get around the ups instead of the downs in the corrugation. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And the pattern is also not purely sort of in the north. You know, the folding might be, the axes might be east-west or west-east, but along the valley, those, how do I put it? Sort of those salients and reentrants kind of protrude or project further across the fault or not, or across the shear zone. So you can see that there are deviations in the pattern of the shear zone, and that's just part of the structure that's produced. That's just kind of a normal part of the movement along that big décollement surfaces.
Okay. Well, can we switch over to some magmas before we go to some live questions, perhaps? Okay.
Let's do that. So let's go magma. So just we were talking about dates, but so if we're thinking about some of the Valhalla complex and the Shuswap and the Valhalla parts of that.
Okay.
Just to put some dates. The detailed work, what it really shows is that there's not a single date. There are multiple episodes or events within each complex or dome. They kind of all have their own history. So we can bracket the overall picture, but within that time envelope, we realize that there are multiple major events where the intrusions, the deformation, and the exhumation happen. But roughly, it's somewhere bracketed between 56 and 48. And it seems to be mostly, early on, it's this tectonic exhumation, right? So it's sort of this gravitational collapse. You've loaded the crust with all this topographic head, this Tekla said, and then you start the relaxing process. And then there's more exhumation that follows past 50, like around 48, sometimes extending to 45 million, and that is mostly from extension. So there's the initial kind of slump. I mean, slump's not the right word, but you know what I mean. There's the initial exhumation from gravitational collapse, and then there's some extension that perpetuates a bit further and longer. And so it goes all the way to about 48, even sometimes 45.
So generally the magmas in the sliding are happening at the same time, but are you saying there's maybe some fine-tuned dates to say some of the sliding is happening after the magmas are done? Or you're not
I think that's the idea, and I think a lot of it is sort of it's related to these complex geochemical reconstruction with cooling ages. But the idea, I think, is that there's some sort of kind of thermal stability. Most of the cooling is done by about 48 and 40 to 45. Okay, so the early on cooling, and the cooling happens in large part because of exhumation there. I think you get that happening at 56 to 48.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Okay.
I'll come back to this diagram in a minute, but let's go to an overview of, say, Chalice Kamloops.
You are prepared.
Oh, yeah, I got a few more going.
I need to get a couple of stickers and put it on your paper here. This is good.
So we'll go real big. So I'm going to zoom out. Trying to link up with what Jeff Tepper was talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Here's roughly reference, the distribution of the Chalice Kamloops volcanic belt.
Yeah.
Can you see that right now? Oh no, not quite yet.
It's a little small, but yeah, we can see it for sure.
Okay. I mean, it's small because it's big, right? I mean, the area is enormous,
Exactly.
so I'm zooming right out.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
you
we're
get
going from Wyoming all the way up to Hawaii, basically.
Basically, exactly. And
Yeah.
we're missing probably in there, this is just the volcanics. We're probably missing some plutonic rocks that are also associated with some of the volcanic systems,
Okay.
right? So if you, depending on whose map you look at, you see more continuity, especially in this gap in northern Idaho. There's probably a bit more than we would think about. But this is I like this image just because it just really shows you on the continental scale how extensive this system is, right? The areas that are involved.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to BC, but that just sort of frames it roughly.
Love it.
That's a distribution. What I've done, the registration of the image onto the topography is a little tricky, so I've mainly registered it based on faults, because the faults are important. So you recognize the Fraser Fault, the Okanagan. So this is one representation that also gets the idea across of how extensive some of these Kamloops volcanic rocks are. There's subdivisions. You know, the Kamloops is a general name, but really the Kamloops is a group within that large body of Eocene volcanics. So it includes the Penticton group, the Princeton group. As we go south, those would be sort of the shades of green to the south.
Yeah.
And as you go north, you end up with other groups that are on the Chaco Plateau, the Endako group, the Utsa Lake group. So all local names, but the idea is that you've got this extensive belt that seems to be largely coeval, or they're occurring pretty much at the same time.
Okay. We're still volcanic. No plutonic yet.
I think there's some plutons in here, some intrusive rocks in pink here and there. So let me zoom in so we can see that pretty well. But there are some intrusive rocks.
I see.
I'm
sorry. I'm thinking of Jeff Tepper now. I'm thinking of his plutons and I don't think he's been up in your country at all. Like, I'm wondering, especially if he's I don't know. I think he dates both volcanics and plutonics, but be fun to kind of see a few nice targets just across the border or something. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, I think it's relatively a first pass attempt of it, because there's a lot of geochemical work that's been done on those volcanics. There's a lot of data. Tons. So there's a lot of data out there that would, certainly allow a comparison, a first order comparison pretty easily.
Okay.
One more that really breaks down the different volcanic groups in the interior. So if we think of that volcanism, it's some of these potassium-rich calc-alkaline rocks. So you've got eruptions of, in places intermediate to slightly mafic, but overall they're kind of felsic to intermediate rocks, if we're going to use those terms.
Sure.
And one of the interesting aspects of that volcanism is that it is coeval. In other words, it seems to be largely contemporaneous. And I'll show you a chart of dates from the paper that you posted from Yaroslav Dustal. So all that volcanism is basically coeval, yet it's not easy to correlate event to event across the whole region. So what it speaks to are probably isolated volcanic centers that are active at the same time, but are not producing, say, a German chocolate cake style of a volcanic stratigraphy where you can correlate flows across large areas.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And I'll go back to the shear zone picture that we were using before, because one fascinating aspect of all this is that a lot of these volcanic rocks end up in grabens. And so the grabens are these, these little basins produced by extension.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can you see me? I think you can. So here, I've got one of these. Can you see this thing? I'm not sure if you can.
Yes, I can make you. Let me make you really big right now. Come on.
Oh, there we go. I think are we good?
Yep. It's all you right now.
Alrighty. So I've just got simple cardboard model that we use in class, but I'm just gonna pull it apart slightly and watch what happens to the center block. So we'll have it drop, right? So that's our grommet, just like that.
Good.
So that becomes our little. I'll pull back a bit so people see better. But that becomes our little basin, and some of the volcanic rocks tend to erupt into these basins. So there's a chance that they're following some of the faults or fractures produced by extension to make their way to the surface. And so when we were talking about this idea of dealing with core complexes and then dealing with Eocene volcanism, they're really probably related processes. So they occur in the same place and they occur around the same time because fundamentally one conditions the other, what it comes down to.
Hey, let me interrupt. Can I test you with your agility with those blocks? Can you grab those again? So please do what you just did, and I can narrate that this is pure dip slip. In other words, Jerome is relaxing, and we've got two normal faults, and our graben is just falling straight down. Now, Jerome, here's your challenge. It's the Olympics now. Can you do the same thing but do trans tension? Can you get some strike slip motion at the same time? You got to use your nose now. I don't know what you're going to do, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Okay.
So I'm going to reset my graben.
Thank you.
And then, so you'll appreciate that from this perspective. So in plan view, that's fairly limited area. So I can only be trans-tensional for a short distance, but we'll make it work.
Yep.
That makes sense?
Yep.
So I'm going to slightly relax side to side to extend, but at the same time, I'm going to push my right hand forward to the screen and my left back away from it. So I'm going to do this. Perfect. And do that.
Aha. Good.
So, let me see for the finishing move here. No, won't play long.
I like it.
But the idea is that we'd end up with something like, hold on a second. This is like judging live.
Right.
I'm wrestling a wet fish. Something like this.
You're doing a great job, and you know what? I'm not going to be satisfied until we do the opposite, because we need, I know it's backwards for you, but you know, Aaron, I'm thinking of Aaron Donaghy, who I think is watching at the moment. We need the opposite sense of shear. Now, don't be mad at me now, but I'm wondering if we can have your right hand pull back. Yes.
I got it. Yeah, I got you.
We need right lateral.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. Oh, my God, that's the Chumstick Basin right there.
There you go.
And I wonder, back to your point, I wonder if the Republic Graben or the Toronto whatever has any sense of that strike slip motion as well as normal fault. You don't happen to know anything about that, do you?
I don't know. I do know that the Republic Graben, so the crossing your trip on Highway 20, you can see it. I think if you're still on my Google Earth screen, I'm not sure if it's still sharing or not.
I'm all screwed up now. Let me. How do I get? How do we do this? Well, there we go. Now we're back. Yep. So do you call it? You don't call it the Republic Graben. What do you call the extension of the Republic Graben on your side?
Well, if you see the map, you can see that the Republic Graben, so this area, this yellow area.
We can see it. Can we zoom in?
You got it. You can see it's yellow because the Republic Graben contains these Eocene volcanics.
Nice. Okay.
And if you follow the Republic Graben across the border, we run into some supercrustal rocks, the green ones, part of the Shuswap. And then I think the Graben is present to some degree, but it's really mapped out as the Granby Fault in BC.
I see.
But it's a continuation. But you can see the Granby Fault has a parallel fault that also lines up with the other side of the Graben. So maybe it's not the vertical motion in the trans-tensional scenario we were playing with,
Right.
be less of it so that the floor of the graben doesn't drop as much, so it's not as obvious of a feature, yet there's still a long strike displacement.
But thank you, and you're such a good sport for playing with all these demands. So it's more our Toronto graben or whatever that is a nice continuation across the border. Is there a BC name for your main extensional graben on your side?
There might be. I don't know what it is. I'll be honest with you.
Okay,
I'm
that's
not
fine.
sure. Yeah.
So because there's a lot of orange there, and the orange we're looking at, which is north of the TC, we're visualizing a bunch of sediment and a bunch of volcanics. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And there are a number of these
Okay.
little basins, and they're kind of for the Eocene time. They're really interesting because you have the basin formed presumably in response to extension. You have the volcanism that I think is reasonable to argue is partly following some of those extensional systems and erupting
Okay.
into them, but also these basins in the Eocene. The Eocene's a very warm time. Many of them had lakes in them, and so there's a couple places in BC and southern BC and in northern Washington around Republic actually, where there are fantastic records of sedimentation in those little graben basins, and they're really nice fossils that are give us really interesting clues about the climate and the conditions. So these basins were basically lacustrine in many places, filling with sediment that was being derived from erosion of the crustal rocks that had been extended, plus volcanic. So you find that there are volcanic clastic rocks that make up part of the stratigraphy in these basins. And then you've got these fossil records. I'll show you some. I mean, I guess I'm going to stop sharing because I need to use my camera. But
good. I'm going to make you nice and big, and we're going to look.
Yeah.
I figured you'd have a couple hand samples to show us. So.
Yes, I do. Well, it's funny. I before we get to the graben, I think I have a twin sample to the myelinite, the Okanagan shear zone rock.
Let's do this. Hang on. Let's twin powers that today.
Actually. Yeah, I don't know. We may be able to.
It's
close. Look at that. Yes.
Very good.
So if you're in Kamloops, if you go to Kamloops, and you go west of Kamloops towards a town called Cache Creek, the namesake of the Cache Creek terrain, but in Eocene times at this point, there's a fantastic fossil beds in one of these little Eocene lacustrine basins called the Maccabee beds. And there's another one in the Republic graben. What's the name again? I wrote it down. Oh yeah, Stone Rose, I think, is the general area. And so they record amazing preservation of Eocene life at the time, insects, plants. I'm going to show you some from the Maccabee here. This is from Maccabee. So leaves that give us clues about the climate at the time. You can find, for example, there's some ginkgo leaves, certain types of ginkgos. You can see one there. There's some metasequoia. I think that, let me get on the right way, this way right there. So one of the species of sequoias. There's alders. On the other side, I got more here coming through here. So it's part of that Eocene story. These volcanic basins that have these lacustrine records of sedimentation and climate, especially. So the leaf fossils and the insect fossils are really useful to reconstruct the climate at the time in the Eocene.
Well, it's a good point that I guess we've totally ignored that this is a really hot, humid time during this crazy Eocene. We haven't really been thinking that much about it, but I mean, just those we've got the same thing down here for sure. So I mean, that's amazing. Thank you for having that. Did you inherit that from a previous instructor there, or was that your own slab that you collected?
No, this was here. This is part of we have that in our collection. We have a few of those. The Maccabee beds are a place that they're really critical in terms of there are very few places that preserve Eocene fossils that well, and the location itself has gone through various stages of more or less protection provincially. I think the province has kind of lagged behind in terms of what it really should be doing in terms of protecting it. So, which is unfortunate, but it's kind of like a type section in stratigraphy. It's one of those places, that where the record is just so exquisitely preserved and so rich that it's. pretty unique.
You know, you are an overachiever. I'm now remembering, you know, in the backyard more than a year ago when I did this British Columbia thing and I didn't know how to do this, you were in the live chat. You not only were answering people's questions, I think I called the thing British Columbia ? Because I didn't know a damn thing. And then you went back like 3 more days afterwards to after the fact answer a bunch of people's questions. So come on now. You are really hitting it out of the park. Thank you for all this.
My pleasure. It's just, it's fun. It's an interesting,
God.
I mean, there's so many interesting questions, right? So that this show is bringing up, and it's making, I mean, it's enjoyable for me in many ways because it's making me connect so many things I'd never really connected clearly. I'm not sure if it's entirely clear now, but it's clearer.
Yes. Well, we're moving in the right direction, I hope.
Yeah.
I think, oh my God, it's almost 10:30. That's how much fun we've had. I didn't even look at the clock. So let's, I think we're going to go to some live questions, even if you had more planned, Jerome. I think I'm cutting you off.
No, that's fine.
Okay. So viewers, let's do some uppercase and happy to involve you here for, I don't know, 10 minutes or something. Can you see these as well, Jerome?
I see some on my phone at the same time. It's a little laggy, but I'm trying to sort of do both.
So between the two of us, so Gary Downs asks, how far does the full turtle shell extend beyond what is visible? Or is it what we see on the map, the extent of the individual plutons? My point being, as large as it is, it might be double that size. Do you kind of know what he's saying?
Yeah. I think that overall he's right to think that we're not seeing the whole thing. I don't know what percentage we're seeing. So could it be double? I suppose. I mean, particularly if you think of it from the standpoint of the volcanics have a plutonic, brother, sister, cousin, whatever, connection. Right. Then I mean, then it's a matter of disentangling the plutons and their timing, which is tricky in some places, as you saw with some of your shows on the Idaho Backlift and others, and Montana especially.
Yes.
But I think it seems reasonable to think that some of that extends south, and probably the bigger, like, how would we tackle how far potentially does it go? Really, the way to tackle it would be to think about the plate motion and the tectonics involved, and what is the cause of some of the upwelling. I mean, it's pretty clear from the Kamloops shale chemistry that even though they kind of look like arc rocks, they're not arcs. I think, even in the old days, it was called the Challis Arc or the Kamloops Arc, but no longer in terms of the understanding. So, it requires some different circumstances for the eruptions, which might involve, what is it? I'm going to try to be generic here. Some sort of gap in a slab. How about that? I'm not saying it's a tear, or whether it's a window or whatever, but some sort of opening.
Well, now we're firmly in Jeff Tepper country. I know he watches some of these, so I hope he gets a chance to see this. And let me keep looking at some other questions here in uppercase. But yes, I mean, to me, that's one of the most interesting parts of this whole thing. Daniel says, so do you think grabens create magma from their movements?
No, I don't think that's the idea. I think the grabens result from extension, but then I'm envisaging, or at least some of the faults that accommodate some of the movement then can be used as pathways for eruptions. I guess that's the simplest way to put it.
Right. Sharon Seal, any thoughts on what drives still active interior volcanism north of Kamloops?
Yeah. So there's more volcanism in BC. In fact, over the last 2 years, I had never fully appreciated how volcanic this province is. And I think you could make the same argument for Washington. The generations of volcanisms are just nonstop across time. So I talked about the Chaco Plateau area for some of the Kamloops volcanics, or I think it's the Utsa Lake group of the Kamloops Challis. that's an area of BC, the plateau called the Nechako Plateau. But there's also a group of volcanic rocks called the Nechako Group, which is younger than those. So they're not related to this Eocene story.
Huh.
And I think those are in part related to a hotspot. In part, they're more like flood basalt, basically.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, yeah, that's another.
That's a whole
nother animal.
Story. Yeah.
Somebody said Jeff Tepper was in here earlier. Is that true, live viewers? Or Jeff, are you still with us? I'd be like to involve you somehow, if possible. So I'll look for another question while we're sorting that out, Jerome. Jerome, do you think the magmas act as a lubricant to exhume or allow movement?
This is way out of my wheelhouse. I
Yeah,
don't know.
too. Me too. You know what? I'm not even going to let you answer because I see Jeff is here. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Jeff, are you decent? You want to come on this thing? It would be fun. It would be fun, I think. Is you okay with that, Jerome? If we do that?
Yes, of course. If you can make it work.
If we can make it work, and if we can get him on, it'd be fun if you had a couple of locations that you know are Eocene that you say there's been work done on them, but like, do we have the precision, even age-wise, that might fit in with Jeff's? Oh, Jeff says yes, but his webcam is not connected at the moment. Okay, well, Jeff, if you would rather just ask a question or two, I'll look for your question text-wise if the webcam isn't working. But it would be fun to get you on camera, but I understand.
There are lots of places. There are lots of places. And one of the papers you have posted is a bit of a kind of review of the Kamloops Shale. And are you asking about age or chemistry? I guess that's the question.
Well, right. Well, from my point of view, storytelling wise, I think I'm interested in ages. Jeff can speak for himself, but like, I think we all know. Well, again,
can I share my screen again? Then let me just share my screen.
Sure. Oh, and Jeff's connected too. Okay, so you share your screen. Hey, Jeff, I'm going to send you an email while shit, can we do this at the same time? Sorry, Patrick. I'm going to email Jeff. And at the same time, Jerome, you can, look at Daddy now. I'm sending emails while broadcasting to 869 people, talking to a guy in another country who's sharing a screen. No big deal.
I'll stall while you do this. Dan has asked, have I ever lost a hammer? No, not the same way that Nick has.
Okay, I just emailed Jeff. So you want to, while we're waiting for Jeff to join us, did you want to share something, Jerome?
Yeah. Let me just quickly share that, and then maybe we can.
Thank you. This is just fun. What a kick, man! This is just a total kick. All right. Okay. And so this is you, and good. I see Jeff's in the green room too, but let's do this first.
Okay. So how am I going to navigate this guy? Oh, there we go. So here's the H sweep of Kamloops Shale. Can you see that large enough?
No. Can you zoom a little bit?
I should be able to do that. I just need to
plus
be able
and
to
minus thing somewhere.
Let me see here. Yeah.
Thank you. Even one more if I'm greedy.
Yeah. No, that's fine. There we go.
Perfect.
Are you over there? So you've got it all in the sense that you got the full sweep of Shale's Kamloops, all the way from the Apsaricas all the way to the Shale's group, Sandpoil. We cross over, and underneath it, you can see what these eruptions go through in terms of getting to the surface. So you've got the Apsaricas and the Shale's going through ancestral North American cratonic rocks. You've got some magmas interacting with terrains and metamorphic core complexes. And then after that, once you get past basically the Okanagan, the edge of the Okanagan Valley Shear Zone, you're getting into the intermontane superterrain.
Right.
What you're noticing is that I think Um, there's some eruptive centers or systems go longer than others, but you could draw a straight line through all of these, and you'd basically be seeing volcanic activity across the entire, that whole sweep that we had on the map, Montana to all the way to center of British Columbia.
Well, I'm going to bring Jeff in just a second, but while we're looking at this, and I think Jeff can hear this at the moment, like, I'm getting snobby now in my old age. Hardly any of those are uranium lead dates, right? So don't we have more precision now where we could revisit some of those samples? Because I'm just wondering if the precision is there. Well, let's bring Jeff in. Thank you. I'm going to hide that. Jerome, you okay if I bring Jeff in?
Yeah, here, I'll just stop sharing, that way we can have the three.
I think I kicked you out. Okay. From Tacoma, Washington.
Actually.
There he is. No, actually, he's up in Port Townsend. That's what he wants to say.
That's right. I am in Port Townsend.
How are you?
Good.
Do you guys know each other at all?
We just met on your class.
YouTube.
Okay. Well, Jeff, thanks for being willing to just jump in. And Jerome, you stick right there. First of all, Jeff, have you done any work with any volcanic or plutonic rocks on the BC side of the border?
No, I mean, I've done some looking at the literature, but I've never done any actual work myself.
Okay. And do you think if you did any sampling north of the border, that would help what you've documented already? Or do you feel like you have enough in Washington to have that age sweep story pretty much laid out?
I don't think the age sweep story would go away. I think the interesting question would be how far northward does it extend? And your earlier comment about uranium lead dates, that is an issue, because I looked at some dates for rocks just north of the border, and they have errors of plus or minus 2 million or something like that, which makes it hard to say whether there's a progression or not. They're certainly in the ballpark of being the same age as the rocks south of the border, but whether they fit into that same progression or how you would draw the contours if they did is hard to tell.
Mm-hmm.
Jerome, do you remember any authors who did some of that geochem work with some of those volcanics up there? Well,
in the table that I showed you, there are some uranium lead dates, not many. So it's a matter of the generation of the time when the studies were done, and this is really that table is a summary of work across a whole, decades of work. But the most recent, I think, that have uranium lead dates are out of a paper in a PhD thesis from UBC by Esther Bordet, and I think Mitch Mahalanek was involved in that study, and that's for the Utsa Lake, so it's for the northern end of the system, and then so there's some dates there that have probably some of the more precise dates for the dating of that volcanic stratigraphy.
I don't know about that work at all, so that's.
I'll send you the yeah.
Well,
but I mean, in the mapping of the bodies of rocks, like there are areas that are mapped as Kamloops group, Princeton group, Penticton group. I think everybody agrees that there are some slight geochemical differences between some of them, but the boundaries are somewhat arbitrary. So they're not resolved well. And is it not resolved because they're exactly the same volcanic system across time, or is it not resolved because there's a lack of a tool or a method to deal, or it hasn't been applied yet to really resolve the timing to say whether or not they're in fact distinct? So there's a combination of those two approaches, timing and chemistry, that need to come together.
Right.
Well, I'm curious. So both of you have seen a few of these past shows, especially with Spencer Fuston and the resurrection plate business. And, first of all, Jeff, can you remind us about a couple of new thoughts you had after working with Spencer and seeing his work? And then Jerome, can you react to that maybe a little bit about, do you see some of Jeff's emerging story with what you know up there? Maybe that's silly to even put you on the spot like that. But Jeff, can you start us? Where are you currently with how the BC Magmas might tie into your story?
Right. So I think the exciting thing to me about Spencer's work was showing the Cascadia slab had this shorter portion to the north and a longer portion to the south. So the southern portion went all the way under North America to Georgia or something, but the northern portion was truncated. And so I thought that tied in nicely with the, the idea that there had been, excuse me, break off of the slab. So that northern part there represents, according to Spencer, about 52 million years of subduction. And so the eastern end of that, if you backed up in time, would be somewhere near the continental margin. Does that make sense?
Yep. And I guess I'm just looking at this now and seeing this incredibly sharp northern boundary. Jerome, is that what's your take on that northern boundary? Is that real, or is he just ran out of data to the north, or like, what do you know?
I think it's somewhat real because there is a plate today that has that's an extension of a boundary of the. I'm forgetting the name. Just north of the Juan de Fuca plate.
Gorda or what?
No, that's south.
Okay.
Is that the Explorer?
Yes, thank you. I think so. So I'm not sure why exactly there is, but there is in fact a line through the northern end of Vancouver Island. In a sense,
okay.
It's like the plate boundary.
Yeah.
But in that case, I'm not sure why that's. Maybe that's the resolution, or maybe it's the end of it.
I thought that was real, and that represented basically the boundary, the slab window between the Farallon and the Resurrection.
Okay.
And what was appealing about that is that if you back up in time, that was somewhere near the present day U.S.-Canada border.
Yeah.
And if that's a limit to the Farallon plate, that would limit what rolled back. You might not expect to see the same pattern north of the border that you see south of the border.
Right.
Now, if you think of your hand, I don't know how I can do this, rolling back, there's going to be a limit. On either side of what rolls back, and that limit. It's appealing to think that limit was a slab window, and there was one apparently right about the Canadian border. So the part that's rolling back, let me do this.
Yeah.
I don't know which way is north here.
You're fine.
If what rolled back is very confusing. I'm not as good as with your blocks. If this is Canada, it's not rolling back because it's a separate plate.
So you're not only, so I think I'm still confused, I gotta say, and maybe we can help in real time. I think Jerome sees it better than I do. You're not only rolling back, but you're dismembering, right? You're breaking it first to get the rollback to start, and then you're breaking it again to have these fingers falling.
So
vertically?
Maybe it would be helpful to think if we make the assumption, which isn't guaranteed, that this curtain that's under Idaho is what broke off.
Okay.
And you could think of the curtain as in 3 dimensions just being like a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper hanging vertically in the mantle.
This thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So that structure has a bottom to it, like 600 kilometers down, but it also has an eastern or a northern and a southern boundary, like a piece of paper hanging vertically.
Okay.
And so the question would be, what's the origin of what caused that boundary to be there? And it was some sort of zone of weakness in the subducting plate that allowed it to separate this portion from what was originally north of it or south of it.
Why does this all go all the way to the surface if it's the thing that broke off of this?
That's the question.
It goes to 60. It goes to 60 kilometers. It doesn't go.
Thank you. That's right. I didn't know
they're not resolving. They're not resolving the upper 6.
Okay. All right, that helps. So, Jerome, we talked about this briefly yesterday. You want to try with Jeff sitting here? Didn't you ask yesterday, Jerome, like, why isn't this just, is slab window and rollback compatible somehow? Isn't that what you're basically asking, Jerome?
Yeah, I guess I was. I mean, to me, it seems like if you look at the slab window, you split your slab in two. So you've got two pieces that are basically liable of dangling or rolling back, right?
Yeah.
And
that's
so
how I would see it. And I would see that the bottom half of what you're holding, Nick, has rolled back and then broken off, and that's what's dangling. And you need a slab window. I think you need that in order to have rollback, because you have to separate what rolled back from what did not.
Yeah.
And you need some kind of a zipper in the subducting plate. And I think that zipper was somewhere near the U.S.-Canada border 50 million years ago, because that's where the Farallon resurrection window is projected to have been, based on Spencer's work. And
go ahead, Jerome.
No, I was just going to say, I'll throw a wrench in the argument, I guess. But I'm going to do a terrible job at explaining it, because it's really not my argument. I just read it in one of those papers by Esther Baudin and colleagues, including Mitch. I think this is all working from the eastward subduction model, but then we do have this idea from Karen's work of a westward subducting system for a long time, up to arguably, I think they would argue in their paper, up to about 60 million years ago. You're kind of closing a basin unequally. So the closure starts at 160 far south, and then it kind of culminates around 60 to the north. And one of the arguments is that the terminal pulse of magmatism in the CPC that your guest Robinson Piso was talking about, so that shuts off right around 4850.
Okay.
And it also coincides with the timing of this Utsa Lake volcanism that are part of the Chelis. And they're geographically at that point. I put up the map again, but it's too many.
Right.
Too much monkeying around. But basically, geographically, they're almost next to each other. The CPC, the eastern edge of the CPC, and the western edge of the Utsa Lake Chelis volcano.
Oh, really?
Are almost like kissing.
Huh.
So I think in their, and I'm parroting and not doing a good job of it.
You're fine.
But I think in their mind there's a correlation in time to the volcanism, and it basically argues that the south central BC is now over this area of hot upwelling material through a gap, right? So it's been able to drift over the gap over time. So, but this is predicated on the westward subduction, I think, idea that you explored, and
wow.
Right, there we go. But I can't do more. I don't know more, and I will not venture deeper into that water. But I'll send you.
Yes, I mean, if it'd be wonderful if there's some new stuff that Jeff can read. And I don't know, Jeff, are you still hoping to publish with what you have now, or are you wanting to expand a little bit before you try to write some of this up?
No, I'm actually writing now.
You are, good.
I mean, there's not a lot more to be done, but I will never publish anything if I just keep going north.
Yeah, right. Well, since I got you here, viewers, I'm sorry, I think we did like one of your questions. So let's try a few more uppercase. My God, it's almost 11 o'clock. This is a record.
Can I tell you a story before we do that? Before we get to the questions?
Please.
An interesting little story. When you had Chris Mattinson on, you were talking a lot about dating and uranium-lead dating, and he was taking you through over time how the method has improved and how his father was working on this method and using it. And he mentioned somebody who was central to this whole method named Tom Crow. I don't know if you caught that in the anyways.
Yes.
One of those giants of geochronology, literally somebody who just did the work he did, just pushed that method. And it's really just today it's an evolution of it. Anyways, Tom Crow worked in the U.S. but was Canadian, and then moved back to Canada. and worked at the Royal Ontario Museum, where he did a lot of this chronology work. And he mentioned somebody who was central to this whole method named Tom Crow. One of those giants of geochronology, literally somebody who just did the work he did, just pushed that method. And it's really just today it's an evolution of it. Anyways, Tom Crow worked in the U.S. but was Canadian, and then moved back to Canada and worked at the Royal Ontario Museum, where he did a lot of this chronology work. Tom Crow passed away, I think, about 12, 15 years ago, but he has kids or had kids. One of his kids is a chemist as well, and his kid, his son, Eric Crow, works in my university. He's in the chemistry department, and he runs an environmental chemistry lab at VIU. And so there's this connection. And so he said, I saw him the other day in the hallway or outside, and then we chatted, and I said I'd mentioned his dad on this show. And he said, yeah, I keep periodically every year I get emails from people I don't know that just tell me how they've been analyzing a sample and using this method and how instrumental it is to them doing their work from that person. So anyways, when I heard his name, when Chris Manson was talking, I thought, oh, that's an interesting little connection.
That is an interesting connection. Very cool. I'm glad you mentioned that. Let's do 3 more, and then I got to let you guys go. It's Saturday morning. You got to go play badminton or something. I don't know what you got. Tepper, I don't know what you're doing in Port. What are you doing today? What's the plan with Carol? Where are you guys heading?
A walk.
Going for a walk. Go on the walk.
Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's nice. Alberta Gary, do you think the plutons you discussed are more a cause of the metamorphic core complexes or more of an after effect of the development of the core complexes? Or a third choice? Has anybody thought about that?
I'd top out and say both, but Jeff probably has a better answer. It depends on the different scenarios. There's definitely upwelling during core complexes, right? Tekla Harms made that very clear. Like, you really can't get it to work without these upwellings that create plutons.
I guess, I mean, this is not, I don't work at all in core complexes, but
right.
I would think if you have a lot of molten lower crust, which is part of what makes the whole system flowing, the pluton is a result of that molten material rising to the surface. But whether that's a cause or an effect is a little bit fuzzy to me. So I think this melting of the lower crust is a prerequisite for both making a pluton and having core complex.
Well, we're finally getting to, I think I'm starting to realize right now that the rheology of the crust, which is one of the big objectives of this current grant with the Dream Team, I didn't give a shit about that. I'm like, why do I care about the rheology of the crust? But now I'm starting to see it. We keep coming back to, I think, what you were just saying, Jeff, and it feels like the state of things, the physical state of this material naturally leads to both of these topics today. They are interchangeable because of just the mushiness, or I don't know how to describe it, but I think I'm finally seeing why that part of it is important.
I mean, I never used to think of the crust as flowing, but clearly that it does. I mean, Donna Whitney's work, there's all kinds of questions about scale of flow. So not just does it flow, but how far does it flow?
Yeah. Okay, it's almost 11 o'clock, and I see some people have visited the building today, so they want to say hi. So, any final thoughts, comments from either of you, except to say, well, go ahead, please. Anybody? Any final? Somebody come up with a cherry on the top of this Sunday this morning.
Let's go to Canada and look at the rocks.
I don't know. I'm suddenly quiet.
Carol, come to Canada and look at more rocks.
Yes, there's the final. Please come north. We'll go look at some rocks.
That's an invitation, and I mean, let's hope, man. We can just cross that border anytime we feel like it and come up and visit, and we'll meet you out there, and we'll just have a grand old time. So, thanks to both of you, especially you, Jerome, for all your time and prep for this show, but of course, Jeff, for your 2 appearances already in this thing. So, thanks, fellas. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you,
My
Nick.
pleasure.
Always learn a lot.
Oh,
Yeah.
Good. All right, have a good day. Bye-bye. Got to get rid of you. What the hell? Okay, now.
You can only dump one overboard at a time.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
that was something. Is anybody still here? 880 people. I think I'm just going to say a toast to you. It's late. A toast to you for staying with us so long. Here's to your health and the health of everyone in your community. Here's to Jerome Lesemann from Nanaimo, British Columbia at Vancouver Island University. Dr. Jerome Lesemann. Stellar performance today. Thank you so much, Jerome. Here's to all the British Columbia viewers, Canadian viewers, who've been so regular, even though we've been so USA-centric. I genuinely hope I can continue to get up to BC at least, maybe Alberta as well, and continue to follow some of these themes. So here's to Canadians everywhere. And here's to Dr. Jeff Tepper and his wife Carol in Port Townsend area of Washington for their special surprise appearance today. That was fun. Thank you. It's time to sign off, and thank you one and all for joining us today. I'm not going to go to the iPad, but you know that we have 2 shows left. Wednesday at 2 p.m. for Session Y, and next Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific, for Session Z. I've already announced, actually Stacia Gordon announced, that all 3 members of the Dream Team will be with us a week from Saturday, next Saturday morning, to wrap this up. And I don't know how it will work, but if you thought today was a circus, we're going to have 4 talking heads at the same time, at the same, on the same real estate next Saturday. But I mostly don't know what we're doing on Wednesday. I have the guest lined up, but I'll have to talk to the guest and come up with the game plan. It will somehow bridge us between today and Saturday. Thank you, dear viewer. I love you, and goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Have a good weekend. We'll see you Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific. Goodbye.